we shall see how the sultans and kings of old paved the way for the news headlines that bookended the 20th century. Along the way, we shall discover what weird things people do with rivers. Trust me, that's more entertaining than it sounds. Plus, we will meet a sick man and a sly fox, neither of whom are actually real people, and the butchers of the Balkans, who regrettably were all too real. Welcome to Travel Trivia ASMR, and another gentle jaunt around the world. This time, we are in a place that is, in many ways, not one country, but two. And when I say in many ways, I mean in two ways. One way is that we are talking about Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia is basically the area in the north. Herzegovina is in the south, and that refers to very old names. We'll come to a little bit more about those later. The other way, of course, that we can consider this place to be two things is by dividing it into what we see as yellow and pink on this map, and we'll come to that later as well. If this is your first time here on this channel, then what we do is we set some quiz questions and then we answer them. But it's by no means a quick-fire pub quiz kind of thing. It's not just what's the capital of this, where's this flag from, and so on. It goes beyond that. It assumes we know the basics and asks questions that you might find yourself asking when you're on your travels. As you wander around, you've got your what and where and when, but you ask, well, why and how? What brought about this state of affairs? So that's the sort of thing, and we'll be hence entering into discussions, telling stories, and so on as we answer the questions. And I really urge you to take part in that conversation by leaving a comment and being part of the community. If you like what you find as we go along, then do please press that like button and also subscribe to the channel, because you subscribing helps the channel grow, and of course the bigger the channel becomes, the more control we can take over things like where the adverts go and so on. If you have come back having seen a video on this channel before, then thank you very much. I guess you know what to expect. So here you are. One person who has been here before and in some ways is responsible for visiting, for us visiting Bosnia and Herzegovina today, is a YouTuber called Tvrtko1. And I was going to, Tvrtko1 commented on a previous video, and we had a quick back and forth, and I said, well, where are you from? And Tvrtko the first said, Bosnia. And didn't really think anything of it at that time, but then when I was preparing for this, I wanted to make sure to mention Tvrtko. I looked up how to pronounce that name, only to find that Tvrtko the first was actually a person in history. Stephen Tvrtko the first was the first king of Bosnia. Who knew? Who knew? Amazing. The king of Bosnia in the 14th century, so going back a long time. And I therefore hope that the Tvrtko the first who commented on my previous video was indeed this person who's somehow found a hole in the space-time continuum and has managed to visit us about 700 years later. Tvrtko the first, thank you very much for your previous comment, and I hope that this video will do your country proud. The king of the Bosnians then, namely the ancient kingdom of Bosnia, which is basically the north of this territory. Let's see what the 10 questions are, and then we'll get underway with the answers. Question 1. What does Neum have that no other city in Bosnia and Herzegovina has? I shall endeavour to say Bosnia and Herzegovina when referring to the whole country, because technically they are two regions of it, Bosnia and Herzegovina. You shouldn't really say Bosnia only if you're referring to the whole place. But one way or the other, there is no other town in Bosnia and Herzegovina that has this thing that we can find in Neum. What is that? That's a map fans question, if ever there was one. I've got my papers in the wrong order. That was question 10. Here's question 2. What Bosnian mourning ritual involves a džezva, a fildžan, and a powdery delight? And I do hope that I don't entirely ruin the local language as I say those words. Question 3. Where was Archduke Franz Ferdinand assassinated? Right. We've abandoned the light-hearted already. Question 4. When did the sneaky fox of Sarajevo first appear? I mentioned that we were meeting a sick man and a sly fox in the introduction. Well, here's the sneaky fox. Question 5. What feat did the Bosnian singer Fazla achieve in May 1993? And if you have seen certain other videos on my channel before, then you might be putting 2 and 2 together. Hello, May and a singer. Yes, it is what you're thinking of. Why, though, is it a particularly noteworthy feat? 6. What do the yellow triangle and the white stars represent on the Bosnian flag? And there's a little more than just peering at the flag, because there's more than one flag when it comes to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Of course there are, because it's kind of 2 places. Number 7. What was the purpose of the little wooden huts standing in the River Pliva? I think that they're located between 2 lakes, kind of in the very centre of the country, and they're very distinctive and unusual, something I haven't seen elsewhere. Question 8. What superlative puts the Neretva River in the record books? Now, the Neretva River is the one that flows through Mostar, and superlative, of course, in terms of language, that means the most something. So, you know, the longest river, the biggest river, the widest river. It could be any of those things, a word ending in est or most something. What is the Neretva River, the most something in the world? Number 9. What artistic sporting event is held in Mostar on the last weekend of July? It kind of links to the previous question as well, actually. And here is 10. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have seen a snapshot of that already. Here it is in its rightful place. Which Bosnian town is named after a silver mine? You might not know it for a silver mine, but you certainly know the name of this town. There then are our 10 questions, and if any of them particularly grabs your fancy and you want to go straight to it, or indeed if you drift off to sleep and you need to come back at any time, you can use the chapters in the video description to jump around as you please. So then, let us get underway with our first question, which was, what does Neum have that no other city in Bosnia and Herzegovina has? So this certainly depends on where Neum is. And if you take a careful look at my map here, you will see that I have drawn around the border of the country. It is mostly red, meaning that it is a land border with Croatia here. Also a tiny section of Croatia down here, barely visible, but a slender section of Croatia leading down to where Dubrovnik is. And then you have Montenegro, Serbia, and there is a little section of the outline of the country right down here that is blue, and that is very much at the heart of our question. Let's have a closer look at where Neum is. Here we see in a map of Europe, a road atlas of Europe. What year is this from? 2022. This was published. Now I want to suspect that this map might already have been out of date when this book was published. If it wasn't, then it very soon became so in this corner of the world. And you can probably spot already that Neum is right down here. Basically, the majority of the coastline on this map belongs to Croatia, and these peninsulas and these islands, they all belong to Croatia as well. But you see, in the inlet of the sea there, that's where the city of Neum is, and you might just be able to detect it. To my mind, it's quite poorly marked on this map. It's a faint grey line, but you do see the border of Bosnia and Herzegovina leading down either side of where Neum is. And so this tells us that there is a tiny section, I think it's 10 miles or so, of coast which belongs to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that therefore is the answer to our question. What does Neum have that no other city in Bosnia and Herzegovina has? We could say that it's a beach, or certainly the sea, or a coast. Now the interesting thing is, of course, that not necessarily, there's a town on the coast. When I was there, I wanted to know, well, what on earth is going on here? Why is just this one town allowed to be in Bosnia? Because that's obviously a deliberate decision, just to allow a section of coast that doesn't belong to Croatia and actually belongs to Bosnia. And the reason is, it goes way back in history to a treaty called the Treaty of Karlovitz, and that's from the year 1699. 1699. Back then, you had two great powers in Europe, in this part of Europe anyway, and they are great powers that will be mentioned a number of times in this video. And that is the Ottoman Empire, which has come over from Turkey, and it's occupied the vast majority of what is today Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also other parts of the Balkans. And you also had what became Austria-Hungary. The forerunner to that, or one forerunner to it, I believe, was a collection of maritime, not empires, not quite sure what the word is, maritime powers who were based in two cities here on the Adriatic. You've got the maritime power of Ragusa, which was the old Latin name, I think, for the city that we now call Dubrovnik, just down here, just sort of bottom right hand corner of the map. And then you've got Venice, which would be off to the top left of the map. So Ragusa and Venice kind of vying for dominance of the Adriatic Sea. And I gather that this Treaty of Karovets in 1699, in order to prevent Venice from taking a foothold on this land via this coast, they actually ceded this section of the coast to the Ottoman Empire to act as a sort of buffer zone to prevent Venice from invading. And it was one of two buffer zones, the other being the town of Herceg-Novi, which is in Montenegro, just over the border from Croatia, just off to the southeast of this map here. And this then set the boundaries which were still in place during the time of the Ottoman Empire and Austria-Hungary in the 19th century. And then, of course, you've got Yugoslavia, during which the borders don't make any practical difference in terms of movement of people and goods. But then, after independence for all of these nations, you suddenly have an international border here. Two international borders, in fact, about 10 miles apart on this coast road, which mean that if you're coming down this road, for example, travelling between Split and Dubrovnik on this coast, you've got to go through this section of Bosnia and Herzegovina around the city of Neum. And that's why I haven't really marked on my map here these two border points, but I have marked with crosses, just for my own reference, the places where I entered Bosnia overland up here, exited Herzegovina, and then on a subsequent visit entered here and exited here. I could also have made marks here. Technically, I've been to Bosnia and Herzegovina 4 times, not just 2, because I went in and out of Neum twice along that Croatian coast road. And I mentioned that 2022 atlas is slightly out of date. And that is because, if we just have a look at Google Maps to help us out here, there's the town of Neum again. Oh, somebody has kindly uploaded a video there showing there's the seafront at Neum. But look at the map now. This was not on our road atlas that we were just looking at. Now, if you're travelling down that Croatian coast road, they've taken a road from the mainland, as it were, over a bridge onto the peninsula here, and then you carry on and you effectively bypass Bosnia and Herzegovina altogether. And that is, of course, an interesting thing to do for many people, because it is not just an international border, but it's these two places where Bosnia and Herzegovina meet Croatia. That's the border of the European Union now, and so I can only imagine how lengthy queues were as compared with when I visited in 2010. Croatia wasn't in the EU, so it was a cursory glance at passports and little more. So, Neum is the only place in Bosnia and Herzegovina where there is a coast, or I suppose we could say the sea. There's a meme that goes around on social media which shows a map of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia, and the caption is Bosnia and Herzegovina says, "Please can we go for a swim?" And Croatia says, "No." Of course, the joke is that from a casual glance it looks as if Croatia completely borders Bosnia on two sides. In fact, that's not true. There is a place where Bosnia meets the sea. So next time you see that meme, perhaps you'd like to leave a comment and raise that point. No, we don't want to get into any arguments with people. What I would like to know in the comments is if you've been in that neck of the woods now, if you were to take a bus from Croatia, from Dubrovnik to Split now, would you still go along that older coast road, or does the bus go over the new bridge? Now then, let us get on to question 2. What Bosnian mourning ritual involves a jezva, a fildžan, and a powdery delight? Well, this isn't particular to any one place, but it does remind me what I should do is mark the names of places as we meet them. So Neum is just here. Let's write that here. Any number of places could be pinned in terms of where this mourning ritual happens, because it is a national thing, and indeed even more than national, it's a sort of a regional thing, because it is not just Bosnia and Herzegovina where this mourning ritual happens. It has come from our old friends, the Ottomans. See, I said we'd be mentioning them again. And so the picture I'm about to show you might put you in mind of being in Turkey, and you'd be well forgiven for that, because you would certainly see this sort of thing in Turkey as well as in Bosnia and Herzegovina, perhaps with slightly different designs. I must say a quick thank you to a friend of mine, Anna, who sent me this picture. She has also been to Bosnia and Herzegovina at a different time to me, and I picked her brain before preparing this video and said, "Oh, what's your favourite thing? What should I mention?" And she sent this wonderful picture. Now, I think she took this this picture in a cafe somewhere. I remember seeing something very similar at a guest house that I stayed in. I stayed at this guest house right at the end of my most recent trip to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it will also be the last place that I mentioned in this video, so I might mention this again. But here we have the džezva and the fildžan and the powdery delight. What are we talking about? Well, of course, we have the tradition of taking morning coffee. The world possibly calls this Turkish coffee. I dare say people in Bosnia and Herzegovina would say, "Oh, no, Bosnian coffee, please." I don't know. Another good question. If you are in Bosnia and Herzegovina, do you call this coffee? Do you call this Turkish coffee? The fildžan. Let's just see these words again. Oh, it's not there. It's here. We've got the džezva and the fildžan. The fildžan is this cup here, which now it looks as if in this cafe a beaker has been placed inside the copper container below, and I suppose the idea is that you wouldn't hold the beaker because it would be too hot, so that's why the copper layer is there to insulate a bit. And same with the džezva, which is the jug here, also made of copper, so you certainly wouldn't want to be picking that up. If it's got hot coffee inside, it would be hot, and therefore that's why you've got this handle to pick it up with and sort of pour. Now, I must confess that when I was presented with this device at the B&B that I stayed in, I took one look at it and said, I am not going to try doing that because I'm so clumsy. I will pour that coffee in places where we didn't know that it was possible for coffee to go. And I asked my friend, and actually I think our host who we were staying with brought it out, and the host may even have poured it. I didn't really notice because we were so busy chatting. But yeah, you pick up the handle there so as to pour it and not get your hands burnt or scalded on the copper containers. The third thing in the picture is the powdery delight. Now, did I make a note of what that is called? Yes, I did. That is called rahat lokum. Rahat lokum. And I suppose, just looking at it, it is the local name, the Serbo-Croatian name for Turkish delight. That's what it looks like, and it's a sugary thing covered in powder. And I think actually that name Rahalokum. I'm not sure if that originally comes from the Turkish words, but certainly the other two things do. In the Turkish language, you've got džezve and fildžan. So in Bosnia they're called džezva and fildžan. In Turkish it's džezva and fildžan. So certainly connected. That's very clear to see. If you're a Turkish delight expert and you're equipped to tell us, actually I think you'll find this is not Turkish delight, it's Bosnian delight, and they are different because ... then please leave a comment, and it will be a delight to hear from you. There's one other thing I just fancy mentioning in the context of food and drink in Bosnia, and that is a wonderful little thing. Just going to the link here for another burst of Wikipedia. Here we go. The thing that was perhaps the highlight, the culinary highlight anyway, of my first trip to the Balkans, cevapi. And cevapi are kind of little sausages made of minced meat, but in kind of moulded into the shape of small sausages. And sadly the picture here on Wikipedia, I mean, I never want to be uncharitable unnecessarily, but it makes me think of something else, and I'm not going to say what. I'll leave that to you. But they are delicious, and when you wander around the parts of cities where there's restaurants, there's a wonderful smell of grilled meat because they're all grilling these things. Cevapi, little sausages. So that tends to be a lunchtime or an evening thing, I suppose, not necessarily a breakfast thing. But the breakfast tradition that we are talking about, the morning routine, the morning ritual that involves a džezva and a fildžan and a powdery delight, that is the ritual called coffee. And if you're anything like me, no day can start without that. Well, now, these days one might casually sit on a terrace of a cafe in a lovely city square and drink coffee of a morning. But 'twas not always thus in this wonderful part of the world. The main reason why I love this part of Europe so much, and particularly Bosnia and Herzegovina, is because the history is fascinating. The start and the end of the 20th century, this is really the epicenter of stuff happening. And this is, of course, the prelude to the First World War. Where was Archduke Franz Ferdinand assassinated? Was it Bosnia and Herzegovina, I hear you say? Well, yes, well done. But there's more to it than that. Of course there is. And this is where we must remember our sick man, which of course was the Ottoman Empire. The sick man of Europe had come from Turkey, modern day Turkey, which is, where would it be in relation to Bosnia? To the southeast, I suppose. Some way off to the southeast. And by the dawn of the 20th century, the sick man of Europe was so dubbed because the empire was falling apart and they hadn't modernized. And so with the various alliances of the first years of the 20th century, you have the Ottoman Empire and and various other people in their camp, and you have the Empire of Austria-Hungary, which, by the way, is the worst name for an empire ever. I know they probably wanted to be fair to Austria and Hungary and not give either superiority in the name, but come on, it's a rubbish name. Anyway, Austria and Hungary, they were the rival. The rival groups going up to the First World War, and then of course you've got Serbia and Russia versus Austria-Hungary, and why does this come to a head here in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Well, it's all to do with a treaty. What's the name of the treaty? Did I write the name of the treaty? Bosnia and Herzegovina was formally annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1908, but actually the treaty that set the stage for that was the Treaty of Berlin. There it is. I've been looking frantically around my notes here. Treaty of Berlin in 1878, which is where the area that had previously belonged to the Ottoman Empire is granted to Austria-Hungary, and then I think they were granted administration of it, and then they formally annexed it in 1908. I don't quite know the ins and outs of what difference that makes, but it's certainly easy to see how the people who live here would look at it, all of this going on around them, and say, well, wait a minute, can't you just leave us alone? What gives you the right to say from afar that you're now in control here? Well, yeah, there's the history of the world. The suffice to say, it was unrest, and there was talk of nationalism. And so when the heir to the throne of the Austria-Hungary Empire, which was Franz Ferdinand, when he was due to come and visit Sarajevo on a pompous visit, various nationalistic people decided, we've had enough of this, and so a plot was hatched to assassinate him. And the guy who actually did it was actually one of 6 assassins. And I've got a little map here which shows the very centre of Sarajevo. There is the river flowing through it, and this map, which is by a creator called H. Maglioni 10, this has charted the journey of Franz Ferdinand and also his wife Sophie, who was killed also. They arrived at Sarajevo station, which is just up here somewhere, just west of the city centre. And so the first point of this map is what happens here. Ooh. See if I can zoom in adequately to read. In the morning of the 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and wife Sophia, they're travelling in a motorcade. Okay, and so yeah, this is where they kind of enter the city centre. Point number 2 on the map is about another of the gang of assassins, and that was a gentleman whose name is what's that? Caprinova. And he threw a bomb towards the motorcade, and he wasn't successful. So the motorcade carries on. They end up at Sarajevo Town Hall, which is still there. I think it was damaged in the war of the 1990s, but then refurbished. Very handsome building, and so this says something like Franz, Ferdinand and Sophie have breakfast and meet the people they've come to see, and then I think what then happens is that this bomb, which was the first attempt to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand, it didn't actually succeed in assassinating him, but of course it did injure other people. And so news of this is passed to Franz Ferdinand and Sophie back in the town hall. So they go back to visit this people and pay their respects and so on. At which point number 4, that is where on the way to returning back along the river, Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, they take a turn away from the river here, and I think that was actually a mistake by the driver. The driver made a mistake, and then when he stopped and tried to reverse or somehow correct the mistake, that is when a young student called Gavrilo Princip took the opportunity to shoot Franz Ferdinand and his wife. And it's right by the Latin Bridge in the centre of Sarajevo. And of course, this is often cited as the event that heralded the onset of the First World War. A lot more to it than that, obviously, but Sarajevo, and specifically the Latin Bridge, is where that assassination took place. The nationalism that, or maybe not the nationalism, but the pro-Slav attitude of those assassins would, of course, become the dream of the Union of Southern Slavs, or to give it the more recognisable name, Yugoslavia. And there's one other thing worth mentioning in the context of this event happening here. The fact that this is the very part of Europe where East meets West, the Eastern influence of the Ottomans and the Western influence of the Habsburgs, the Austro-Hungary. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Sarajevo, is where those cultures have collided. And here, at 3 or 4 streets back from the river, it's not marked on this map, but this is where it is. 3 or 4 streets back here is a pedestrian street. And let's just find the relevant photograph here. At this street, you see there on the road, might just be able to make it out there, it says Sarajevo Meeting of Cultures, and there you see West and East. And taking a wider look at the buildings on the western side of the line, you've got these slightly larger Austrian style buildings, And on the eastern side of the line here, you've got the lower roofs of Turkish-looking buildings. And it is such a striking thing. Another reason to love Sarajevo is that on the western side of the town centre, of the city centre, it is like being in Vienna or somewhere. And then just a couple of 100 metres down the road, you're suddenly in a bazaar from some provincial Turkish town. It's wonderful. And you have your high-end fashion shops up here in the Habsburg area, in the Austria-Hungary area, and then down here in the Turkish area. Well, yeah, that was my favourite bit because it's where those sausages were. And you've got lots of shops of tourist interest selling those coffee pots and goodness knows what besides. So I can think of no other place where two cultures so vividly face each other. And it's not the only place where it happens. It's not the only place in Sarajevo is not the only place in Bosnia and Herzegovina where that happens. There are other places, as we know from the conflicts of the 1990s. There's various ethnic groups, and you do see them side by side in town, perhaps separated by a river in some cases, but there in Sarajevo it's the same street. And of course that inscription on the road, the Meeting of Cultures sign, was unveiled long after the troubled breakup of Yugoslavia. It was unveiled in 2014. But certainly one thing to love about Sarajevo, but by no means the only thing. Let's put Sarajevo on the map before we go any further. And it is just here. Where should I write it? Where can I write it so that it's going to be legible? Let's put it here. Question 4 then is, when did the sneaky fox of Sarajevo first appear? Here is that sneaky fox. His name is Vushko. I think it's a boy fox. I just make that assumption. I don't know if I have the right to do that. I do know that the word Vushko is a diminutive of the word Vuk. Vuk, I think, means fox, and so you put the shko at the end to mean little fox. I think that's how it works. And this chappie was chosen out of a possible 800 ideas to be the mascot of a certain event that took place in Sarajevo. And it was a public vote in a magazine, and it was Vushko that won. You might just be able to see, I find that hard to see with my terrible eyesight, but you might just be able to see on Vushko's scarf, you see the Olympic rings. For yes, Vushko is the Olympic mascot of the 1984 Winter Olympics in Sarajevo. And the reason why he has become known latterly as the Sneaky Fox is because he's now kind of an emblem of the city, and you see him in other places around town, particularly tourist shops where he's on merchandise, and you might see him in shop windows and so on. So the Winter Olympics is the time that he first appears. (1984) Winter Olympics, and it's a fascinating Olympics. I've said before in videos that the reason I love sport, or the thing that I love about sport, is not the actual action itself, it's the statistics and the kind of geography related facts that come about from sport. And so I very rarely sit and watch the sport, but I'll pore over the medal tables and the like, and stats about how many times certain cities have hosted and all that stuff. That's how I roll. And so the Winter Olympics of 1984 is interesting because there were various firsts. I'm just having a look here for a Wikipedia page, because I want to check the medal table just whilst I'm doing it. See, here's a bonus question for you. Not how many medals, but which country was top of the medal table for the Winter Olympics of 1984? What are your guesses? This was the first time that the Winter Olympics had taken place in a socialist nation. I happen to have at my fingertips a 1980s map showing what was then Yugoslavia. And so Sarajevo is down here, and so at that time Yugoslavia is a socialist country. So our first time the Winter Olympics have been in a socialist country. And lo and behold, it's other socialist countries that do well in the medals table. The gold medal position, or the top spot in the medal table, was claimed by East Germany. And then second in the medals table, although actually the country that won the most medals overall, they're just second because they didn't win as many golds as East Germany, is the Soviet Union. So you've got a socialist host and a socialist 1-2 in the medal table. Oh, this is a very heavy book. Let me put it away again. And then I'll show you the proof. There is the medal table from the 1984 Olympics. East Germany top, Soviet Union second. Yugoslavia, by the way, won their first ever medal at a Winter Olympics on home soil It was a man called Jure Franko, who was actually Slovenian but Yugoslavian at the time, and he won a silver medal in the giant slalom, and was no doubt much celebrated as a national hero in what was then Yugoslavia. And of course, 4 years before, at the 1980 Summer Olympics, well, that had been in Moscow, so this wasn't the first time that any Olympics was in a socialist country, but it's the first time the Winter Olympics were there. It has been suggested, maybe unkindly by certain commentators, that the reason East Germany and other socialist states did so well in those Olympics in Sarajevo in 1984 and Moscow in 1980, the reason for that is that quite a lot of non-socialist places boycotted and were therefore not taking part. Still, I wouldn't like to be so uncharitable as to say that myself. The Sarajevo Olympics of 1984 are an interesting precedent in history when we spool forward to 10 years later. And that brings us to question 5. What feat did the Bosnian singer Fazla achieve in May 1993? Well, front and centre of this discussion is this map. A map of Sarajevo, Olympic City, 1984, surrounded city, 1992 to 1995. Now we have to forgive this map because it's the wrong way round. It has the south at the top and the north at the bottom. The city of Sarajevo, if we were to look at it on a conventional map with the north at the top, this would be at the top. So you've got the centre of town with the river running through. The red area there shows the forces of the Bosnian Serb army, backed, I suppose, by the Yugoslav army. And the area marked white is the area under the control of the newly independent government of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But what the Bosnian Serb army intended to do was to surround the city and basically starve everybody. They didn't want to go and actually invade the city, as it were, and therefore lead to a loss of life for Bosnian Serb soldiers. They just took up positions on the hills either side, and there was a rather macabre nickname for the main road running through the centre of town amongst journalists and probably locals as well, I suppose. They called it Sniper Alley because there were snipers up on the hillsides waiting to pick out anyone who was in view. This happened in the siege of Sarajevo, the longest siege of any capital city in the modern era, and this was from April 1992 to February of 1996, a period of some 1400 days. And the only point at which it was theoretically possible to leave the city of Sarajevo and move into free Bosnian territory was here at the airport, which was under the control of the United Nations. I use the word theoretically, of course, because the enemy army is either side, and anyone who endeavours to cross over land, cross the runway, is likely to be shot. Yet still, the besieged city survived for nearly 4 years. How did they do that? They did so. Where's my other? I'm sure I have another picture there. Oh dear, I didn't save it here. Let me just check where it is. Yes, it is this picture that I was thinking of. They did so by means of a tunnel, and you can see there, there is a person who happens to be my friend walking ahead of me, and you can see how he is stooping, and so that can tell us the height of the tunnel. It is about 1 metre tall and less than a metre wide, and it was, during the siege, 700 metres long, and it went under the airport. That's how they got supplies in and out. Food, weapons, everything they needed to survive was coming into the city by means of that tunnel. And I think it was only men in the army who were permitted to go through there, and possibly some UN people as well. But they didn't just let any old person through. The reason that soldiers were allowed to go through is because there was the high chance that the soldiers would come back to be with their wife and children who were in the city. And of course, this was top secret. I dare say that most of the population didn't even know where this tunnel was. Certainly the Bosnian Serb army didn't know where it was. And that's because it was concealed in the garden of a private house, basically. Picture of that, there it is. It is now the Sarajevo Tunnel Museum, represented by the national flag there, but if it weren't for the flag and the poster there, you would happily drive past that without giving it a second glance. The back garden backs on to the airport, and it was here that the side of the tunnel on the southern side was the exit out into the world. So you may well be thinking, what about this singer then? What feat did the Bosnian singer Fazla achieve in May 1993? Well, it is related to the fact that Sarajevo was under siege. Strictly speaking, it's not related to the tunnel, because though Fazla got out of Sarajevo for this particular purpose, he didn't actually use the tunnel. Fazla is a gentleman by the name of Mohammed Fazlajic, shortened to Fazla, so that people elsewhere like me can say it easily. And off he went with his band to compete in, yes, the Eurovision Song Contest on behalf of Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1993. The first time that Bosnia and Herzegovina took part in Eurovision, and indeed the first time that Slovenia and Croatia did too. It was the first time that countries of the new countries of Eastern Europe were allowed to take part. Yugoslavia, of course, had been in Eurovision for a few decades, but Yugoslavia was now not taking part. So how did Fazla get to Eurovision, which was taking place in Ireland in 1993? Well, of course, Eurovision is a contest between broadcasters of various nations, and so it's not just Fazla, it is the Bosnian TV company taking part. I'm not quite sure how many representatives of the TV channel went with Fazla and his band, but it wasn't just Fazla, it wasn't just the band, there were some other people in the entourage. And the way they managed to escape in order to attend Eurovision is at night, under the cover of darkness, they ran across the airport runway, obviously risking their lives, obviously risking the fact that they might be shot, and sad to say, some of the entourage were indeed shot. And so it would take a lesser man no further thought than to say, you know, I haven't got the courage to do that. I don't really want to risk being shot. This is how powerful appearing at Eurovision was. Eurovision isn't supposed to be about politics, but it sure was for Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1993. The song was called Sva bol svijeta. Sva bol svijeta, which means all the pain in the world. And there's a line in it which I'm translating, and it says, I can't find a way out, but I can send you this song so you know I'm alive. So it's supposed to be a song by a soldier who's participating in a war, sending a message in song to his loved one who's away over the border in safety. And Fazla said in an interview, which I read on the website Eurostory, which is for Eurovision fans like me, Fazla said, you have to understand that when we entered Eurovision, my country was set to be wiped off the map. Europe appeared to have decided we were not worth fighting for. Well, Fazla did fight for it, and he did so by getting out and spreading that message. The Eurovision of 1993 was the first one that I watched. I vividly remember Bosnia's reception, not just the singer, but the bit at the end where they do the votes and someone's on the phone from each country. I think they were still on the phone and not in vision at that time. And when the spokesperson for Bosnia and Herzegovina came on the line and said, "Good evening, Ireland, Sarajevo calling," there was an almighty cheer. Because, of course, the news was nothing but Bosnia and the wars of the Balkans at that time. So such a huge event. How do we describe the feat? Well, there's two ways of putting it. There's entered Eurovision, but it's not just that, it's escaping the besieged city in order to enter Eurovision. If you don't know that story, maybe you're too young to remember it, then do have a look. Look at the videos of Eurovision 1993, and you will see the raw emotion in the room when Europe rallies around in support of Bosnia and Herzegovina. There will be more to come on the subject of the 1990s. But first, the light-hearted matter of today's flags. What do the yellow triangle and the white stars represent on the Bosnian flag? Now, for this purpose, let us get our flags of the world, and I think it's going to be in this box here. The flag that was used to represent Bosnia in Eurovision of 1993 was not actually the flag of today. I'm going to keep that one for reasons that won't become clear. That's the Russian flag, but I'll make reference to it in a minute. Also, if we happen upon the flags of Serbia and Croatia, they will be noteworthy. Oh, that's the flag of Kosovo. Similar things, similar design to what we will see in the Bosnian flag. But yes, the flag that was used for Bosnia and Herzegovina during the first 6 or 7 years of its independence was actually the shield of the old Kingdom of Bosnia, the one that we started with old Trutko the First. I do apologise for getting your name wrong. Trutko, is that the right pronunciation? Yes, Trutko. Oh dear, I'm ashamed of myself for botching that pronunciation. And the shield of the old Kingdom of Bosnia and Herzegovina was in the same colours that we now see on the Bosnian flag. It was a kind of a dark blue shield with some white and gold on it. In fact, I think when I was preparing a few things to look at, one of the things was the page here about the flag of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but it also shows, there you go, that's what I'm talking about. There's the royal banner of the Kingdom of Bosnia. And I think if you kind of flip that over a bit through, not sure if it was flipped through 90 degrees actually, was it? Yeah, there you go. So that was the flag of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina from 1992 to 1998. There you go. At which point they changed to this one. Okay, so why are we looking at these other ones as well? This, I'm cheating. This is actually the flag of Russia. My little box set of cards of flags of the world does not include the other flag that you see in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which looks like that. It's basically an upside down version of the Russian one. And we'll come to what that is in a moment. In terms of the flag that is used internationally to represent Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have the blue background there, we have a yellow triangle, and we have stars, white stars. I think it is 6. Oh no, it's 7. 7 white stars plus 2 halves of stars. And the idea there is that the stars are supposed to be infinite. It's supposed to convey the idea that they're disappearing off the top and the bottom. And of course, this is clearly a reference to the flag of the European Union. It's the blue and yellow European colours, stars on a blue background. This is a nod to Bosnia's Europeanness, if you like. So that's what the stars are all about. Whereas the yellow triangle is there for 2 reasons. It is, first of all, representing the shape of the country, kind of triangular shaped, but also, in fact, let's put these here. Also, the yellow triangle denotes the fact that there are 3 key ethnic groups in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The yellow points, the 3 points of the yellow triangle, obviously it's 3 points or 3 sides, and this is the 3 ethnic groups: Bosniaks, Croats, Serbs. And I list those in no more than alphabetical order. Bosniaks, which is to say Bosnian Muslims, Croats and Serbs. So that is the flag of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the reason I've popped these other flags in vision as well is just to think about what's going on this map. You note that part of it is yellow, part of it is pink, and there's also another section there which you may have noticed, which is a sort of orange. Well, these are the 2 entities of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I said at the start that we can think of this as 2 countries in 2 different ways. First, we could divide it into Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we could also think of it as the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is the yellow bit, and the Republika Srpska, or the Serb Republic, which is the pink bit. The orange bit is called Brško district, and I hope I've got the pronunciation of that right, Brčko district, and that kind of overlaps. It sort of belongs to both of them, which you can tell both from its physical location as the point where the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Republika Srpska meet, but also it's right here next to the border where Croatia and Serbia meet as well. So this is a real melting pot of those three different ethnic groups. And I think that the reason that was put aside to be treated differently by the Dayton Accords, this was the peace accords that were set up and took place in Dayton, Ohio, under the presidency of Bill Clinton. It was them that mapped out what are we going to do with this territory, and it's that made official these borders and made the two-entity system that we see today. And they treated Brčko district as distinct just because it has a bit of everybody in there. And I think that the Dayton Accords just kicked it down the road for somebody else to sort out. And I'm not sure what there still is to sort out there. I do know that the UN's supervision of Bosnia and Herzegovina lasted until 2002, and then it was passed to the EU, the European Union, and then I'm not quite sure whether that is still in place. I do know that the European Council, which is one of the myriad branches of the European Union, they opened talks for Bosnia and Herzegovina's accession to the EU in 2024. So I assume that all of these little puzzles over ethnic tensions, they're going in the right direction. Otherwise, the accession talks wouldn't have happened. I remember when I first arrived, when I very first set foot in this land. It was at a place called, I'm just going through my notes here, what it was called, Shamats. Shamats. It's just up here where this, put this cross. Let's pop that on the map there. Shamats. That's the border crossing entering Bosnia and Herzegovina from Croatia on the train. And I entered on the train there, came down to Sarajevo, spent a couple of nights there, carried on, down, exited not far from Neum, which we were previously talking about. Let's put all of these in. Gabela is the Bosnian town where I exited, this time by bus, and down to Dubrovnik, and then spent my time in Croatia. Subsequent visit about 12 years later was this time in a car with a friend, and that was entering via from Montenegro at a little village called Hum. Actually, it was such a remote border crossing, really, that the road wasn't even sealed. It was a dirt track and quite difficult to drive on. But we entered there, entered the Republika Srpska, the pink area. No sooner had we entered than we found ourselves entering the yellow area, and then hence saw the flags of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Left it again to re-enter the Republika Srpska, and you can see there that the Republika Srpska comes right up to the barrier of the city of Sarajevo. So it's, during that drive, we've got a lot of crossing internal borders, and our leaving point at the end of the trip was over here. That cross there is a city called, or a town called Bratunac, and that's where we left by car heading off into Serbia. But that first time when I was on that train preparing to be in Bosnia and Herzegovina for the first time, I got chatting to a young man who was sitting in my compartment. I think it was one of those older European trains where you're in a little compartment of 6 or 8 people, you know, like you used to get in, or you know, you get in Poirot stories where there's a murder. Well, there's this young chap who may even have been in military uniform, I don't recall. I might be confusing that in my memory with the border guards who were, of course, in uniform. But anyway, I do remember that this young man said that he had a German father, a Bosnian mother, or the other way around, and that's why he was coming into Bosnia by train to visit family. And he said, well, what on earth are you doing visiting Bosnia? What brings you here? And I said, I just like to go everywhere, really, but particularly I'd grown up and Bosnia and Herzegovina was in the news all the time when I was a teenager. And so I was really, really fascinated by what there was to discover, and particularly the way that recent history was remembered. And he sighed and said, well, I don't really know why you find that interesting. It's such a complicated country. The second time that I entered, well, if we discount going in and out of Neum, the second time that I entered Bosnia for the purposes of a visit, a proper visit, was coming here, and in the car we went through the border check, at which point I think there was a Bosnian flag, a flag of the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And no sooner had we entered than at the side of the road we saw this flag here. Except it didn't look like that. It was kind of hanging from a lamppost. A long banner of it, like that, vertical. And we hadn't done our research properly, so we looked at it and said, well, what's the flag of Russia doing here? And it can't be any coincidence, really, when you think of the historical connections going back to Franz Ferdinand and the pre-First World War alliances. Well, Serbia and Russia were bedfellows. They were Slavic peoples, and so these are pan-Slavic colours, and that's why you get the same colours on the flags of Croatia and Serbia. And of course, it is no coincidence that the flag of the Bosnian Republika Srpska and the flag of the country Serbia, they are remarkably similar. Well, I said, in the words of that companion of mine on the train, that Bosnia and Herzegovina is a complicated country. I have tried to understand the way that it happens now. That I think there are 3 presidents. There's a Bosniak president and a Croatian president and a Serbian president, and how any decision ever gets made beats me. And I think it's among the greatest achievements of that country that it hasn't been in the news again, basically. Whatever they're doing, they're doing something right, because it seems that membership of the EU might be just down the road. So the answer to the question, the yellow triangle and the white stars, well, the yellow triangle is the 3 ethnic groups. And the stars terrible looking star. I think, as far as I have worked out, that is a reference to the European Union. It might be a bit more to it than that, but that is the basic reason for the design. And if you're thinking, well, goodness me, we haven't had enough of the Bosnian politics of the 1990s yet, well, don't worry, there's more to come. But let's turn our attention to some slightly more light-hearted matters, and also some other things from way back into perhaps a more innocent time of history, if I can put it like that. And the first of these, for question 7, what was the purpose of the little wooden huts standing in the River Pliva? And there you go, there's a picture of them. Once again, courtesy of my friend Anna, who took this picture. I have a feeling that there is only one location, or at least one part of Bosnia and Herzegovina where these can be seen. It might be that it is literally one spot on one river, and it's this set of what they call what's the Serbo-Croat word for it? Mlinici. Oh, dear man. Come on. Let's take a run up and try it again. Mlinici. And I think, well, I've read an article that said there are 19 of these Mlinici, and so that leads me to believe that they may just be in this one spot. There may be another location which also has them. If you know that to be the case, then please do leave a comment and enlighten us all. But aren't they cute? And I mean, you can tell from the size of the surrounding trees that these are not large things. And also, if you think about the Mlinici, I will write the word that I've been struggling to say. At risk of getting my Slavic text slightly wrong. I think that's how you spell it. Mlinici. I don't speak any Slavic languages, but I do know from Spanish and French, which I do speak, that if we just look at that first part of it, Mlini, that reminds me of the word molino in Spanish or moulin in French. Of course, even if you don't speak French, you've heard of the Moulin Rouge in Paris, which means the red windmill, and that points us towards what this word means. molino in Spanish, mulla in French, and mlini in Serbo-Croat is mill. It is a mill, and so this would be the diminutive, which means little mill, little mill. And you can obviously see, when you look at the picture again, if you hadn't worked it out before, the way that these mills are clearly placed over a fast-flowing river. The design is to harness the power of the water to mill grain. And so they're built over the river here. Certainly not big enough to be inhabited. No window, no chimney or anything. Just a place for machinery inside, I suppose. And folk would come down from the surrounding areas, and they would bring their bags of whatever it was, corn and wheat, and they would grind that down and then take it away again. And I've also read that it wasn't just a community enterprise. Like sometimes you see washing troughs, old stone troughs which would have been filled with water for people to come down to the market square to wash their clothes. And that would be a community enterprise. I don't think this was for the benefit of all. I've read that it was private enterprise, and that families would own them, and so you couldn't just show up and use one. It would basically be friends and family only. But I don't know, I might have got the wrong end of the stick there. But either way, it's a wonderful little reminder of pre-industrial times, and I believe that there is a project to get some of them operational again, only for the purposes of showing them off to tourists. But what a great idea that would be, a great little thing. It reminds me of another thing that I saw when I was on the train coming down from Šamac, arriving in Bosnia for the first time, and bound for Sarajevo. Quite a long, slow train journey through the mountains. And out of the window of the train, I could see in people's back gardens there were sort of conical or pyramid-shaped structures of what looked like straw or twigs or something like that. And these were dotted around the landscape in garden after garden, as if suddenly entering the land of the three little pigs. And I never did find an answer to what those were. Now, I have a suspicion that because they were in private gardens, they might have been something to do with storing food and possibly keeping it cold, because obviously the twigs or the whatever was used for the construction was built in such a way that it would provide shelter for the sun, but also leave gaps for the wind to flow through. So you'd have a combination of shelter, but also refrigerating air. And so, therefore, I think it's basically a very old form of fridge. I might be totally wrong. If you know what those things were in people's gardens, then do leave a comment and tell me if I'm right or not. Now, there's just one more thing to mark on the map before we leave that topic, and that is the location of these jobbies here in the river, the mlinici, the little mills. They are at a town called Jajce, sort of just northwest of Sarajevo there. And the other thing I need to do before we leave that topic is write the answer in English, because I answered the question in the local word. Mlinici are little mills. We're staying with rivers for question 8. And I'm not going to lie, this is my favourite question in this whole quiz. What superlative puts the Neretva River in the record books? Now, you know the Neretva River because you've seen it, possibly on the news, certainly in tourism shows and sort of National Geographic and that kind of stuff. And you have seen it in pictures like that. Oh dear, I've got adverts popping up here. I'm looking at a website, and the reason I've zoomed in on the picture is because if I zoom out, you'll see the answer to the question. Let me see if I can get rid of this advert. There we go. That is the city of Mostar. And the Neretva River is the city that flows right through it. And I remember that I'm just looking at that mosque in the background. Evidence that this is the realm of the one-time Ottoman Empire. They've brought their mosques along and left them behind. And I've got a feeling that's the first mosque I ever went in. I definitely remember climbing up and standing, probably not all the way up at the top of the minaret, but somewhere up, perhaps on this part of the roof, in order to get a stunning view of Mostar and the river. So, the Neretva River is that very green and fast-flowing river that goes through Mostar. And let's put Mostar on the map already, because it's going to be the location not just for this question but the next one. And I've got a feeling that the Neretva River rises in the Dinaric Alps, somewhere, I think in northeastern Bosnia somewhere, by which I do mean the old kingdom of Bosnia. And then I think it kind of performs a bit of a loop round, and it comes down through Mostar and ends up in the Adriatic down here. So it is the very green river, and you can see in pictures of it, even in Mostar, you see how the surface of the water is disturbed, which tells us that it's fast flowing. And that's going to be key to our question, which is, what is the superlative that puts the Neretva River in the record books? And as I said earlier, the superlative means the most something, so that the biggest, or the longest, or the widest, or the fastest flowing. Well, it's none of those things. Otherwise, I wouldn't have just set them as an example. So what do you think it is? What are your guesses? It is quite a short river. It's only 140 miles long. But in that time, on its journey from the mountains down to the sea, it descends through 1,227 metres. And 140 miles for a descent of 1,227 metres, that's quite steep, I think. That would explain why it's fast flowing, because it's going down at quite an angle. And what else can I tell you about it? Let me show you one more picture, which is pertinent to the question. And I will put in the description of the video the photo credits for where these pictures come from. This is a picture of the Neretva River. Further upstream from Mostar, you can see that it is fast flowing here, but most importantly, you can see that it's flowing through a canyon. That also helps us with our superlative. And the last piece of information that you need to know in order to answer this question is the fact that it starts up in the mountains where there are glaciers. So the source is glacial. The water is fast flowing because it's a steep descent. It's going through canyons and therefore is deprived of sunlight. And also it's green because of the mineral content. The reason that rivers like that look green is because they're full of limestone. It's flowing through limestone bedrock. So there you go, you've got four factors: the glacial source, the steep descent, hence fast flowing, the canyons depriving it of sunlight, and the mineral content, all of which make the Neretva River the coldest river in the world. I went out for dinner with my father last night, and I was telling him all about this. And he's a bit like me when it comes to aspects of geography. He loves this stuff, and I can't tell you how long we were talking about this. We went into all sorts of directions of, well, this is absolutely astonishing, isn't it? When you consider how far south the Neretva River is, why isn't the coldest river in somewhere like Iceland? I've stood in Iceland and looked at rivers which look absolutely freezing. This river doesn't look particularly freezing. So I think this is probably the biggest factor of all, is the fact that it flows through canyons a lot of the time, and therefore the sun doesn't get to shine on it whereas those rivers in Iceland, in the winter, they won't have sun shining on them, of course, but in the summer they do, and so they will warm up. This river, the Neretva, is kept at a more or less constant temperature throughout the year, regardless of the air temperature around it, and is because of the glacial source and the steep descent and the canyons depriving it of sunlight, and also the mineral content which prevents the water from heating too. I think all of those things are true and make it the coldest river. Now, there are two things to bear in mind as we go through to the next question. The next question is, what artistic sporting event is held in Mostar on the last weekend of July? The first thing to remember is the temperature of the water. 7 degrees Celsius. That's relevant to this. And the second thing is the name of the river. Neretva comes from an Indo-European root, which means back along. They've traced it back into the common language that predates many European languages, and they've found the root ner, N-E-R, which we see at the start of Neretva, and the meaning of the word ner is also relevant to this question. So the temperature of the river and the meaning of the name of the river, they are both relevance there. I don't want this lovely picture of the gorge anymore. What I do want is the picture of Mostar. And actually, I'm going to move to a different website again. I mentioned this is from a website. It's called Which is the Coldest River in the World? There you go. There's the bread and butter of travel trivia ASMR. And there's a long explanation of why they're, along with various other pictures. And I'll share that link in the description so that you can delve into it further if you wish. The last website, or the last website on this topic is oh no, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I've been looking at a website which beautifully answers this question, and I've just gone to it, and it says we're sorry, the page you're looking for doesn't exist. Well, yes it does, because I was looking at it yesterday. Let me just have a quick look on Google, and by the magic of editing I'll be back with you. Okay, well, I have found a site which gives us the answer, and at least an image that we can look at, and it's one that I hadn't seen before actually. This is actually a website whose domain is Bosnia, so it is the website about the Stari Most. The Stari Most, meaning old bridge in Mostar, and it says the old bridge jumping experience. Now, lest we get the wrong end of the stick, I don't think this website is claiming that tourists can come along and have the experience of jumping off the bridge, because, as we've previously said, this is a very cold river, and so quite apart from the height, which is I think it's about 24 meters above the river, even without the height, simply the experience of jumping into very cold water is enough to shock you and potentially kill you. So I don't think tourists can merely present themselves at a tourist agency in town and say, can I pay you to help me jump off the bridge? When it says old bridge jumping experience, I assume they mean the experience of watching others do it. This is there's lots of information. I'll share this link in the description as well. Lots of information about other people doing the jumping. Oh, and there we are, as if to prove it, there is a picture of a man in his pants jumping off the bridge. The artistic sporting event that is held by men in their pants in Mostar on the last weekend of July is a diving festival. Now, of course, the Stari Most, the old bridge, is not just a beautiful thing. It's also hugely symbolic in the history of the city and in the history of the conflict of the 1990s. It was commissioned by Suleiman the Magnificent, no less, in the 16th century, and then it was destroyed in November 1993 when the Bosnian Croat forces, kind of based up here in the hills, I think, they decided to bomb the bridge because it was being used as a supply route by the Bosnian Muslim army. And forgive me if I've got some of the terminology wrong there, but it was definitely seen as a legitimate military target because it was being used by armies. And so it was rebuilt in from 2001 to 2004, and therefore they could resurrect the tradition of jumping off the bridge, and this goes back as long as the existence of the bridge. I don't know if they can even date who were the first people to dive off the bridge, but certainly a formal diving competition was introduced in the 1960s. There's now a world diving series, or rather a diving world series, sponsored by Red Bull, and this is on that circuit, and this is part and parcel of the identity of Mostar. The name of the river, by the way, I previously mentioned the temperature of the river being 7 degrees Celsius, the coldest river in the world, so you would not want to be jumping into it willy-nilly without lots of training. But the name Neretva comes from the word ner, for to dive. That is what ner means, to dive. And so I want to assume that there's some other reason. Surely it's not called that. They can't possibly have named that river Neretva because people were diving into it. That doesn't seem to make sense. It's more likely that the steep descent of the river gives a sort of a connotation of diving, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe you do know that Neretva comes from the fact that folk have been diving into it since anyone can remember. My memory of seeing that river is that I stayed in a guest house which was, I think, from this vantage point, it was just the other side of that mosque there. And the garden of the guest house led down to the river. You could actually walk down and stand in the garden, or sit in the garden of the guest house and gaze at the river as it raced by. It was really fast flowing. And I said to that the owner, how long have you been here in Mostar? And he said, you ask because of the war. And I nodded to allow that was the case. And he said that he had been in Mostar, had even been running a guest house before the conflict of the 1990s. And he spoke about how hard those times were. There were shrapnel and bullet holes in the walls of the street right next to where his guest house was, because of course it was next to the river, and so you've got forces on opposing sides of the river firing at each other. And I said to him, how is business now then? This was the year 2010, I think. And he said, well, it's picking up, but some people are still reluctant to come to this part of the world for whatever reason. But, he said, I've got another guest staying with me now. You'll meet him at breakfast tomorrow. And he's in town to take part in a sporting competition. No, it wasn't the diving. This other guest wasn't there for the diving. It was something like, I don't know, squash or some sort of individual sport like that. And this guest house owner was really excited. He said, this guy who's here for this sport, if he does well in the sports contest, then that's 2 weeks of a customer for me, a customer staying with me for 2 weeks. That would be brilliant, because that rarely happens. So I went down to breakfast the next morning, expecting to see this chap. And I said to the owner, what about this sports guy then? I was looking forward to talking to him. Where have you seen him? And he sighed and said, yeah, he got knocked out in the first round, so he's already left. And I mean, bless that man for joking about it, because he was running a business where every penny counts, and so for a potential 2-week guest to leave after one night is a real disappointment, I'm sure. But it is something worth remembering, actually, as we move into the final question, because question 10 is definitely no laughing matter. Which Bosnian town is named after a silver mine? You have heard of this town. The reason it's named after a silver mine is something that dates back to Roman times. Indeed, it is a town that the Romans, when they were first coming into this sort of neck of the woods, they discovered this resource of silver, and they set up a town, and they called it Argentaria. Argentaria. Argent, of course, is must be the Latin for silver, is it? Argenta. And Ia is the well, we see it here, don't we? Bosnia is the Roman and Latin convention of saying this is a town named after something. So Argentaria basically means silver town, and in the English equivalent, I suppose it would be Silverton. Silverton. I've been to a place called Silverton in Australia, and that too is so called because there's a silver mine there. So Silverton, or Argentaria, is this town over here. It is known today, of course, by a Serbo-Croat word, and the word for silver in that language is srebro, and you combine that with the convention for place names, which end in itsa to mean place of, and so therefore we get Srebrenica. I've thought long and hard about what to say about Srebrenica, and I don't want to say too much for fear of getting something wrong. There are many other excellent creators out there who have done justice to the story of what happened in July 1995, when some 8,000 people, mostly Bosniaks, which is to say Bosnian Muslims, were killed. And this has been labelled by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia as genocide. And there is now a memorial to it. And so, while I'm not really going to go into the details of how that event came about and who was responsible and who admits what and who denies what, all of that is very well covered elsewhere online. What I can talk about is the experience of visiting there today. Srebrenica is 2 or 3 miles down the road from where the massacre happened. The people who would come to lose their lives were taking refuge in a building which had been a factory that made car batteries, and then it became the headquarters of the Dutch battalion who were acting on behalf of the United Nations, and they were supposed to be protecting the civilian population. And there in this place, the building is still there. The building is now a memorial, and it is the memorial to the Srebrenica genocide. And the interesting thing for me was that the narrative of the memorial, and indeed the very title of it, the first sign that I remember seeing on entering the building was it said, Srebrenica genocide, the failure of the international community. And so when it goes into great detail, it's a very absorbing place, it's harrowing, of course, there's lots of photographs and artifacts, as well as a comprehensive commentary and video testimony. And I felt that it wasn't really making an attempt to be critical of the actions of the Bosnian Serb army. It was taking the tone of, well, you know, this was war. We're not here to point fingers at the army. What we do want to do is criticize the UN peacekeepers, because it's they who neglected their duty. Hence the title, The Failure of the International Community. And so while they spelled out the events and they talked about the protagonists and they talked about how people like Milosevic and Karadzic and Mladic, that they were then subsequently taken to trial at The Hague, it talked about them in very sort of matter-of-fact terms. You know, this is what happened, that's it. Where it raised questions was in the conversation about the Dutch. And it was interesting that the first time I went to Sarajevo and I visited the Sarajevo Tunnels Museum, which we saw earlier, I actually signed up for a tour to go there, and everybody else on the tour was Dutch, with a whole host of teenagers that had come from the Netherlands, especially to kind of pay their respects, almost as if they felt a personal need to apologise here in this place. And this has been acknowledged by courts and some politicians internationally. You know, yes, there were failings by the Dutch on behalf of the United Nations. What we're actually looking at here is a video that I took up here on the hillside. And I'm just going to play the video. You will hear that the only sounds are distant traffic and some birds. We're looking down into the valley here, and as the video pans round and we see these thousands of individual gravestones, you'll see at the bottom of the hill the concrete buildings are what is now the Memorial Centre and was the UN headquarters, staffed by the Dutch battalion. And also at the bottom of the hill you'll see a kind of a round structure right at the foot of the hill, where the gravestones cease and they give way to this circular enclosure. Well, that is a place of worship, and it is where every year they continue to hold a memorial service, and they still hold burial services here because the remains of people are still being discovered in mass graves, both near and far. You know, the fact that that is here is so dignified, so respectful, so honest. Because there are many countries where a terrible thing like that may have happened, but the authorities of today may say, oh, no, we don't talk about that. We certainly don't list each person individually and give them their own gravestone and put them all on the side of a hill. And it's all the more remarkable for the fact that Srebrenica is in the Republika Srpska. So it is a place where nobody had much heard of prior to 1995. Srebrenica had been there for nearly 2,000 years, but it was just a quiet mining town until the genocide occurred. And that happened when I was a teenager, and it was just at that point. You know, we all have a point in our lives when we change from being a child to being an adult, and so and this was in the news at that moment for me. It was just when I started to become aware of the things that were in the news, kind of taking a deeper interest in them. For years, remember that 1995, the war in Bosnia had been going on for several years, and so I'd been accustomed to hearing that name in the news, but it was hearing of this particular episode in Srebrenica that really called me up short, and it's one of the three events in my kind of childhood, adolescence, where I can remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when I heard all about it. The other two are the death of Princess Diana and 9/11. So for me, visiting Srebrenica was absolutely seminal. It was all about remembering a place that I first heard of for sorrowful and horrific reasons. But now you can go there and it is a beautiful, serene and dignified place. And they remember that event in exactly the right way. I was blown away by how raw, but how rational as well the Srebrenica memorial is. And it's at places like that that I remember that we kind of have a duty as travellers not to keep things in mind that were in the news and take a dim view of them forevermore. You know, just because something terrible happens doesn't make a place bad. It doesn't make the world bad. It's quite the opposite. Most people in most places are really, really nice, including the family that I stayed with in Srebrenica, who poured my coffee for me that morning, as I was talking about earlier. So I like to remember whenever I see whatever is in the news today that makes you upset. It's full of sorrow and horror, because the news always is. But those same places we'll all be okay one day. Thank you for staying to the end, and I hope that this gentle jaunt around Bosnia and Herzegovina has provided something to entertain you, to amuse you, to inform you, and also to make you think. If you have comments to make, maybe because you know that I've got something a bit wrong, please don't be shy, don't be rude either, but drop a comment and let's further the conversation. And if you have any suggestions of other things that we might explore either in Bosnia and Herzegovina or in another country in a future video, then I'll be delighted to hear from you for that reason as well. At the very least, do please press that like button and subscribe to make sure that you can be a part of the community going forward. And as I finish the video here, there will be some links popping up on the screen to take you to some of the other videos on the channel. So I hope that if you're still not ready for sleep, you can join me for another gentle jaunt around the world.